so much.
Thank you, Eric. That's great. And Eric and his colleagues are here, so be sure to catch up with them and with your questions. So now we're going to move back over the border to the Chain of Lakes region. We're going to hear from Pat Smarto and Ted Kratschmer on the watershed plan the Fox Waterway Agency has underway. Pat is chairwoman of the agency's advisory board, and Ted's firm is Northwater Consulting. Ted lives in St. Louis, but he visits a family who live along the Fox River in McHenry County often. We're glad he's helping out. So who's leading it up?
I'm starting now.
Okay, great.
Good morning. I had to chuckle this morning. We're the part of the Fox River that our speaker, who was a paddler, was scared to go through. That's us. So as he said, I'm the chair of the advisory board. We're a volunteer committee within the waterway. And I went through some notes and realized I've been on since 2018 and been talking about this watershed plan since 2018. And we were thrilled last year when we were granted the from the IEPA and had to go from 0 to 60 basically very quickly to start to meet the timelines. I'm fortunate that I have 2 volunteers who have really stepped up, Northwater, project manager, and the waterway, so that we are on target with the timeline and expectations. Ted's going to go into really great detail of where we started and where we are, and I'm here for questions if you need to ask any at the end. So, Ted?
All right, thanks. Excuse me. So we don't have a lot of time and I have a lot of slides, so I'm not going to hit them all. But so our goals for the watershed plan, as you can see on the right here, our watershed plan and the watershed and our watershed planning area are not the same. So, you know, we have a really small part of the Fox River watershed that actually mostly just encompasses the Chain of Lakes. Actually, I think like 30-some% of our planning area is actually open water and the Chain of Lakes, which is different than many watershed plans we do. But our goals really are to produce an actionable plan to address those identified issues. Yeah, as I mentioned, 4 sub-watersheds here, a bunch of municipalities, super important recreational resource. You know, many people live in the watershed. 319 program, I'm gonna skip that for sake of time. Same. So yeah, our planning grant was awarded in 2022 after a couple of rounds of applications. We have a bunch of partners on this project, which is really awesome. So the whole watershed plan is about $170,000 effort to begin, and then that doesn't even talk about the actual implementation part of the plan, which is arguably the most important part. What's great about this plan is it's been led by the Fox Waterway Agency, but more importantly, a local stakeholder committee. Pat and the rest of the folks on that committee are really the driving force behind the plan, and that is super important. Here at Northwater, I work for Northwater, and we are running the technical parts of the plan, a lot of the modeling parts, compiling the plan, and we're supporting the public participation as well. But really, the local leaders of the planning process could not be more important. I guess one thing I'll mention, though, seeing Eric's presentation, there are a lot of similarities between the TMDL or creating a TMDL and creating a watershed plan, and you'll see some of those similarities as I go through, I think, but there are also important differences. As he mentioned, our portion of the Fox Waterway and the chain had TMDL approved in 2020, and we lean pretty heavily on that TMDL as we are compiling the plan with some, what I'll say are enhancements to the TMDL, specifically in the implementation part and how projects are put on the ground, I think. You'll see in the final plan. again, a watershed plan just provides a roadmap to achieve objectives. Why are we doing it? There's no watershed plan currently. Again, more specifics are needed to generate action on our TMDL in our area. Really, a plan is required to access additional funding, and then there's always been a local desire to improve water quality. And the things that our plan will address are sedimentation, recreation, nutrient loading, specifically phosphorus is our big one. We have this, there's actually in our TMDL is a bacteria limit in a small part of our watershed, and then a need for coordination across jurisdictions. So our stakeholder group came up with these great watershed plan goals, and they're really simple, but there's a lot that goes behind it. Our water's clear enough that you can see the bottom in shallow water. The water's free of excessive nutrients, so algal growth does not turn our water green. Our water's clean enough that there are no recreational restrictions for boating, swimming, and fishing. And our community and stakeholders are knowledgeable and engaged in the preservation of our watershed. I think those are great goals, very actionable, and we can do a lot with that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing on the plan itself. We're characterizing the watershed, doing a lot of on-the-ground work of issues and concerns. A lot of, you'll see in this next slide here, we literally did a boat tour of the entire shoreline of the chain of lakes to look and see what's the conditions on the ground there. We also drove an incredible number of miles in our watershed and looked at what's happening on the ground and places we can implement management practices. I think these are super labor intensive things that often don't get done, so we get a lot of really generalized ideas for best management practices. And I think the investment that the Fox Waterway Agency has made and the EPA has made in this plan to do stuff like this will be very helpful going forward. Obviously, I've mentioned water quality is a big concern, and it's a big part of our plan as well. On the right here, just I don't want to spend much time on this. This is a super preliminary analysis we've done looking at total phosphorus going into Grass Lake over the last 13 years and trends. So pretty flat overall with a little bit of decrease in the last few years. Don't think too much about that because it's really rough analysis so far. Land use is a big portion of what we take into account in the watershed plan. But I think the meat and potatoes of what we're doing is loading and modeling and having it be very spatially explicit so we can calculate the best bang for the buck on our nutrient reduction implementation project. So best management practices. We look at loading throughout the watershed, and this is an adjacent watershed. We've not completed this for the plan yet, but it's in process. But this is an example of one of the outputs in our planning process. And you can really see through that on-the-ground work, remote sensing type stuff, land use, we can identify land use types and on-the-ground conditions to really start to target our practices that we're recommending in the watershed to do nutrient and sediment reductions. So yeah, again, this shows up in the presentation multiple times, but we want our management practices that we're recommending to be tied to an actual location. We think that's really important in order to get the best bang for the buck or the lowest dollar spent per load reduction in phosphorus and sediment. Critical areas, of course, are an important part of what we're doing in the watershed plan. Costs, again, I keep beating this, it's a dead horse at this point, but the specific locations and unit costs are incredibly important in our watershed plan. And I'm gonna end there and happy to answer any questions. I'd encourage anybody to reach out to any of us or the Fox Waterway Agency, the steering committee, or any of us at Northwater for more information. So, Pat, yes.
And as part of it, we had to create a separate website. So if you would like some specifics on the educational sessions we've already done, it's foxchainwatershed.com. And we've got a question.
Is this being done as a 9 element plan?
Yeah, 9-element plan, yes. Yep.
Is there currently an active dredging program in the chain?
There sure is. 100,000 cubic yards are taken out every year. And we aren't keeping up.
And where is that being taken out?
All over multiple sites and with different mechanical and hydraulic dredging.
What's the source of the bacteria that you mentioned as part of your management?
So probably we haven't gotten that far, but from conditions we've seen, likely septic. Yeah, but maybe some miscellaneous, geese or other livestock.
Been a lot of great stuff for planning and modeling here. Seems to me implementation would be a payoff. And you're doing a great job of balancing cost benefit. With this, what I call more radical views nationally about cutting budgets, can you give us an honest assessment going ahead whether actual monies can be allocated at the federal and state level to do some of this? It doesn't have to be all or none, but could you be honest about that? What's your perspective about that?
So yeah, my perspective is a few things. One, right now especially, there's a lot of infrastructure money out there. So that in and of itself is a huge thing. Farm conservation, Farm Bill is a big, annually or however frequently they renew the Farm Bill. That's important. We don't have a lot of agriculture in our planning area, so maybe that's not quite as relevant, but we have in our planning area very active county and municipalities. And I think the biggest thing is for Chain of Lakes specifically, this is a huge recreational resource. So we got tens of thousands of people using it every year, all feeling some ownership of it. And so people like Pat and the stakeholder group are going to be the driving force in getting those funds. And yeah, there are funds out there. So it's, yes,
The thing that we're
there's
trying
money.
to focus on with our educational is the pursuit of big money is obviously part of it, but we're also trying to focus in my backyard. What can you do in your backyard, in your little microclimate? We are doing rain gardens and bioswales. How can you make a difference in your 50 feet of shoreline? So we're trying to take it from both ends.
Great. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Pat. So as Ben pulls up the slides, now I'm pleased to introduce Daryl Smith, who is the Watershed Program Manager